So our course is basically on business leadership here, and we thought we can talk to a business leader who's been proficient and who's been inspiring others. So we thought we could have a conversation with you about that, your experiences and insights on various grounds. So yeah, we would like to start off with some questions, asking you and like to share your experiences and insights on the same.
No, absolutely. Happy to
Yeah,
share whatever I've learned.
yeah, sure. Fine. So, you've been in multiple positions. You've been in multiple roles, in Cognizant and here also. So, how do you prepare yourself, before you take up a new role? May it be the same organization or a different organization.
Sure. Yeah, I think the critical thing, and especially in the last 15 months, it's been uh, it's critical. It's been an experience that I've come to value, right? Because especially when the first 21 or so years in Cognizant, moving around within an organization is a different dynamics. You still need to prepare for a role. How you prepare is a little bit different versus when you are moving organizations altogether, right? So it's been a different experience the last 15 months or so since I've left Cognizant. But essentially, fundamentally, certain things that I look for, right? One is uh, who are the people that you're going to work with, right? At the end of the day, in consulting services and the knowledge based industry, it comes down to people and personalities, right? And that's number one, both in terms of the folks above you and folks who are going to work with you, that you need to focus on, right? So what is the management style of the folks that you're going to report into, what drives them? And not everyone is driven by the same things, right? Eventually everyone has targets that are tangible in terms of revenue or margin, or how much bookings that you need to make and things like that. But fundamentally how people approach it is different, right? So to learn that, and you don't often get to know the full extent of it day one. So when I was with Cognizant, that was relatively easier because most of the time, while I changed roles, I in a way worked with the same set of management team, except for the last 2 or 3 years when Cognizant was going through a significant amount of change, right? But you at least have enough of a network to talk to the network to understand people's different styles. So how do you tap into the network and understand the different people's style, and going through the process? And for the critical people and the stakeholders that you're working with, take the extra effort the initial few weeks. If you put a 30, 60-day and 90-day plan in terms of what you're going to do in the role, doing your one-on-one time with people you are going to work with the most, right? And really understanding them, be it people who are directly part of your team or the extended team. So that's something that I take extra efforts in, especially when I made the switch from Cognizant to a couple of other different roles. Taking the time to understand them, how they are motivated to the extent that you can, right? And then once you talk to certain people who is more forthcoming versus others, then with the people who are more forthcoming, then you spend extra effort and things like that, right? So that's critical, right? I mean, I think in my business, it comes down to a lot of people related stuff. So that's number one. Number two is, what is the organizational culture, right? So there is obviously, when I worked with Cognizant or now with Virtusa, and in between I was with a small digital consulting firm, there is a group related culture within the teams that you are working with, and there is of course a broader organizational culture that is there, right? So understanding that group dynamics and the culture, and what motivates the team as a whole is important, right? So that our culture and the org dynamics. And just in terms of obviously the sheer goals, right? What is the group that is try if you look at a short term and longer term goals, what is this group trying to achieve, right? Be it tangible goals like revenue or margin and other things, or there are uh, other goals that are there, which is the group is focused on building out new client base or new capabilities and things like that, right? So what are those strategic goals uh, that are laid out, right? And what is the current vision and path of achieving those strategic goals, right? So there is a vision, there is, then if you look at a 3-year plan, how do you take it from a 3-year plan to a 1-year plan, which is more tangible, and from 1-year plan to a quarterly, set of clear cut rocks or clear cut tasks that you can accomplish, right? So what is the current lay of the land around that, right? And really understanding that is key, because you need to know what you're signing up to do, right? And are you starting from a point of where something is good and you want to take it to great, or something is nascent and you want to build something, or something is struggling and you want to take that to stability, right? And from that perspective, that's critical, because you want to know the lay of the land. And then second is, it also plays into what you believe your strengths are, right? Your strengths might not be, my personal strength, as an example, is my more I feel, and I know in terms of my experience and other analysis over the years that I've done, that I'm my strength is more aligned at taking something good to great, right? I'm okay at taking a sinking situation and resurrecting it, but in the longer term, I don't get motivated by it, right? So again, knowing that is important, so that you know what you're getting into, because you can't be great at everything that you're doing, right? And then how do you manage that based on that, right? So those are kind of some of the things that I look for when I get into a new role and transition from one role to another.
Sure. So a follow-up question on that. So when you say from a good to great, or something that's very nascent, you have to improve that. So you start it right away, or like you take time to do that. You absorb the atmosphere and the environment, and then you start off. Or how do you, how the process is?
No, absolutely. I mean, you need to understand what is, and especially coming into a new situation, you don't know the dynamics of the people, right? And there is uh, obviously eventually it comes down to the people involved, right? There are interpersonal relationships that need to be built, and especially when you are coming into a new role. Um, Irrespective of what role that is, whether what level in the hierarchy you are, trust is a two-way street, right? Just like how your team needs to build the trust with you, you need to build the trust with them, right? So they are also watching out, hey, is this person competent, is this person really bringing the right values that I know we look at, and things like that, right? And same thing vice versa, right? And in the right kind of sense. And you never know what was the dynamics of a environment or team fully well before getting into it, right? So absolutely understanding that is key, right? And that's where knowing the lay of the land, when you go through a process of where you are evaluating a role, be it internally to get into or externally when you're interviewing, asking the right questions to understand what situation you're getting into, and are you going to be hitting the ground running, versus you have the time to build a plan and work towards a plan is key. So absolutely, there is I would say the process is to, yeah, people say it's a 30, 60, 90-day plan. That's loosely a 30, 60, 90-day plan, right? You basically prioritize what is most important based on what goals you're trying to achieve, how short the time frame is, how long or a medium term the time frame is. Now you don't always have the luxury of doing that all the time, right? So, in one instance, after I left Cognizant, I just had a brief stint with a digital agency, right? It didn't quite span out to be what I thought it would be, but 2 weeks after I joined, it was a completely new experience to me, new environment, different organization culture. All of us were remote, so they had this process called as a quarterly. It was a I don't remember the exact term that they used, but essentially they had a 3-year vision, 1-year target, and then quarterly they had ways to achieve towards that 1-year goal, right? So, and then every quarter they pick 5 different things to work on to help them achieve, what they were moving towards on a yearly basis, and they needed someone to drive each of this, right? So 2 weeks into my job, I was asked to pick one of the 5, right? So I didn't know what I was getting into, right? And but then I just needed to learn on the fly and be more, there are certain situations that demand that you need to go the extra step and work through it. So in those instances, you just improvise and go the extra step and do it, because you just don't have the luxury of time to study and learn the process and all of that, right? So you just be more entrepreneurial in those instances, right? But yeah, where time is not as much as a constraint. You go through a little bit more methodical process of analyzing, understanding, and then creating a plan. If there is a plan that exists, if it is great, that's good. If not, based on what you have learned and what you believe, tweak the plan, right? And then again, that requires stakeholder buy-in and things like that, right? So work with the right people to tweak the plan and things like that, right? And again, the intent is, when you come in, is not to change up the landscape altogether, right? There is probably, good stuff in there, but if you could make it better, great. If it is, already well thought out and your job is executing on a plan, then get to execution, right, as soon as possible once you know about it.
Yeah, sure. And so you've been in leadership role. So do you have any leaders who actually inspired you, or qualities from your leaders that you saw, even if it's not just one person, from multiple leaders as such?
No, absolutely. No, that's I think it's over the years, many, right? Going back, so when I joined, Cognizant, as a trainee. So at that point, there was an individual called Sridhar Thiruvengadam. I don't know that in this long time before you probably joined Cognizant, right? So he eventually left Cognizant as the chief operating officer. So he used to run the. So I was part of the insurance vertical within Cognizant, if you will, right? So he used to be the leader of the insurance practice at the time, right? This is back in 2000. So every morning, I used to live like a couple of kilometers away from the office, and bachelor days didn't have anything to do. So I used to, out of all of us who used to leave, I used to be the one who used to wake up early. So the got ready and got to the office, right? So uh, I usually, in India, you guys know people come into the office late. So I used to get in the office at 8, right? So the office was completely empty, but every single day, irrespective of what it, and then I started at 8:30. It became 8:15. It became 8. It became 7:45. Whatever time I came, Sridhar was already there, irrespective, and he's like, he was up there, right? So, and then I tried to keep beating it, and then I realized that I need to be in there by 7 to beat him, and then that was not quite, something that I could accomplish on a consistent basis. But going back, those memories still exist, right? In terms of sheer determination and hard work and the focus and all of that. And then over the years, many others, right? So when I then moved to the US for the first time. The manager that I reported into was an individual called Ram Krishnamurthy. So the way he builds the relationship with the clients, and just, he's more, I would say, the strategic thinking kind. So how he brings the knowledge into problem solving. Then Dharan, you might know Venki Vijayaraghavan, who was with Cognizant. Again, his ability to collaborate and bring together people, people's strengths, be it externally, interacting with clients, and being able to build relationship with clients, or internally, is amazing, right? Then a couple of others. There's a leader called David Altoff that I reported into while I was based in Chicago. So his meticulousness, preparedness, how thorough he is in front of the clients, and when you have a situation, how to have the back of your team, especially, we are in the business wherein we interact with a lot of clients, right? So and lot of times there is conflicts. It could be, it's healthy conflicts, right? But still requires mature heads to prevail and intervene and things like that. There are a lot of people who, you work with on a day-to-day basis, who you just learn from, right? In many other situations, in terms of persistence and the knowledge and being able to be creative and things like that. So these are just some names that I can immediately think of, but it's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people that I've learned from over many years, right?
Like, how do you tell no, like in difficult situations when you have to tell no? Is it easy for you, or do you find it difficult?
No, I mean, I see. It's naturally, it's something that I find difficult,
Hmm.
right? Again, some people are very comfortable at it. Some people are not. Naturally, I'm not. I'm not greatest at that, right? I'm not. I'm not. You wouldn't send me for a UN peace negotiation, right? So I'm not. I'm not a great negotiator by my natural skills.
Mm,
But it's something that I've learned, and obviously that's where leaning in on people and understanding and the learning over experience is critical. And I've gone through some coaching sessions. When I was back in Cognizant 3-4 years ago, there was a coach. We had a 2-day process where we went through and talked about why I react the way that I react in some situations, and how do I think about it, and all of that. um, Generally, I'm not a confrontational kind of a person, right? So you need to be comfortable with not necessarily confrontation in the wrong kind of way, but being comfortable in confrontation when you are in negotiation kind of process, right? So that's a little bit more tougher. But in terms of saying no, it is, you don't always need to be in a negotiation process to say no, right? And there are certain situations that is pretty black and white that you need to say no. And in those situations, you just do it based on what the facts are, right? It could be facts that are data driven, facts that could be otherwise, right? I've often come across situations, especially when I've not so much worked in India, but I've been on the client side working in the US, interacting with clients, right? That you've had to say no. One, because you're being put into unrealistic timelines to meet stuff. That's a pretty clear cut, straightforward thing, right? The data says that this is not achievable. You want some timeline to be achieved. Here is the data, right? You need to get stuff done. It's not a straightforward conversation, but it's an objective conversation from your standpoint of view. The person on the receiving end might not always look at it as an objective conversation, because he or she might be under external pressures. Their job might be in line if they don't get something done. So they don't look at it from that standpoint of view, right? So you need to understand what is emotionally driving them, right? What are you know is this really a top down directive that they are after, that is forcing them to do it and all of that? But if it's data driven, it becomes at least the conversation becomes easier. When it is personalities, it becomes a lot more challenging, and oftentimes I've run into that, right? So we've had, especially in the situation that we are in, which is a consulting business, we have a lot of times conflict with, unfortunately, some of the client employees and associates that our employees and associates run into, right? So how do you step in and manage those situations? I've had a couple of tough situations wherein you just have to put your foot down and say no, right? So there are situations where things turned abusive, right? It does happen, right? So how do you just, in those situations, your moral compass as a leader needs to be clear, right? You need to stand behind your team. You may not be there day to day working with them, but whether it's a client or, you know it doesn't matter, right? So you just put your foot down and say no, right? So I've had situations where a couple of instances where we have had to take client employees to report to their HR because of such situations, right? So those situations are clear cut. There is you just need to be driven by your moral compass. The conversations is not going to be comfortable, but knowing that you're doing the right thing makes it relatively, mentally meaningful for you, right? It is still a learning process every time that I go through, in terms of how do I navigate it, and how do I best position it. Hey, how is this person going to think about it? And overthinking that process. But nevertheless, what motivates me is what is driving it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
Thanks,
Mr.
Luke.
Praveen. This is Sumit. So you spoke at a great depth about understanding the lay of the land when you are working with projects, and planning ahead always helps. But sometimes the world is full of volatility and uncertainty. So I wanted to understand, how were you able to manage a huge number of associates during the uncertainties like the Chennai floods and the cyclones?
For me, talking about Chennai and being there and going through the experience was during COVID, right? And it just seems uh, it, it was just 3 years ago, and Dharan, you would appreciate this. As much as technology and how we work, and the remote working, should it be hybrid working, should it be in office, and all these conversations that we are having now, just 3 years ago, a lot of us, including me and Dharan, all of us, when we went to the office in Chennai, we were working in a situation wherein we didn't even have phones in at our desk, because the client that we were working with wanted all our phones to be put in lockers before we go into the floor, right? and none of us had work desktops. So people like Taran, who used to work in a client environment, I at least had a laptop, but they had to work on physical desktops which are connected to the client network, right? And there were security protocols and things like that that was in place, which didn't allow them to do it otherwise, right? So I was running this engagement and this account, as we call it, a very large relationship. We had probably across 6 or 7 locations in India: Chennai, Pune, Noida, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Kochi, Coimbatore, many different places. So over like probably close to 2,000 people, right? 1,800 people or something like that. And pretty much overnight, we had to come up with a plan as to how are we going to make these folks work from home now, right? So it is, and all of us are going through our own emotional, things during the time, because there are people. Chennai was getting pretty much shut down. A lot of our associates were working, they were from other towns, so they'd come into Chennai. They live in Chennai. Chennai had the 10-kilometer stretch road, or whatever, 20-kilometer stretch road that all of us used to live and work in. Had a lot of these PGs, right? That a lot of people used to stay in. All those PGs were getting shut down, right? So on one side, there are people who are trying to get so we had this entire dynamics of how do we get these people taken care of. So there was, the organization was arranging some temporary arrangements. There are people who were ready to take them in and all of that. The entire cognizant was probably about 200,000 people in India at the time. They needed to figure out a plan to move these out and all of that, right? So at the time, eventually, once we got through all that initial emotional sense and all of that, the objective from my perspective, there are situations, the way I look at leadership is that there are times that you need to know when you need to lead from the front, and when you need to be behind your team, right? And eventually, in that situation, it was clear cut to me that it was a situation for me to lead from the front, right? And in general, I don't always believe in a command and control kind of an approach, but when the situation demands it, you need to be ready to take the bull by the horn, right? So that's what I did, right, in that situation. That one, you need to keep the team motivated, that hey, we are going to get this done, right? We don't know how we are going to get it done, and we'll figure out a way. And at the same time, we need to and it is not just about getting it done from the fact of we will address the client need, which is to get you know the desktops out or whatever, but getting everything done, right? Which is, are we taking care of the people that we have, and are we landing them in the safe place? So have people who are more focused on that. And then from the security arrangement perspective, and getting the infrastructure out and getting it set up and all of that, how thinking about all of that, right? And that's where it's just not about one person's effort, right? There are people who are good at certain things, right? And Dharan would probably know, being in the Chennai floor, there are people who are naturally good at working with people, right? So we had a set of folks who are really locally very talented, be it in Chennai or other locations. They had a lot of connections, so we had them go after, you take care of the people. If they need to move, go for it, and you guys take care of this, right? And these two three fake people are good at solving the security stuff and all of that. You guys take care of it, right? And I will go break down the logistics, work with the management to get the permissions and all of that, right? So it was a looking back, everyone came together, everyone understood there was a purpose. We were motivated towards a goal, and we were working towards a goal. Entire organization, cognizant, had and we had to move literally desktops out, because there was a shipment of laptops that was coming in into Chennai, and that was stuck in Malaysia because of lockdown or whatever. So people didn't have laptops. So we physically had to move desktops to their people's home for them to be able to work it. Now, moving it is one thing; whether it is going to work there, and what happens when electricity goes off, and all of that was like a problem that we didn't even think of at the time, right? So they had moved 1,800 desktops out across all of India, 1,800 desktops, right, to be able to make people productive. The account that we were on, which was like a 2,000 people account, 10% of the, 1% of the entire company, we had moved 1,200 desktops out of that 1,800, because it's just the people came together and we found a way, right? So it was about things like that. So just looking back at that experience, it was amazing, how people came together when everyone was going through an emotional stress and not knowing where things might be going. And you look back, those kind of situations are the ones that probably make you feel accomplished, right? Strategically it didn't help us achieve the next 10 million or 50 million or whatever, but in terms of just people coming together and being persistent, getting things done, those are kind of some memorable lifetime experiences that you carry forward.
Absolutely true, Mr. Praveen. So I think the collaborations and being empathetic to the situation we can prevail any storm that comes across to us. Being said
Absolutely.
that, I'll pass on the mic to Pragya.
Hey, Pragya.
Hello, Praveen. I can completely relate to your situation wherein you mentioned that you had to submit your phone because I belong to a manufacturing background and we had to deposit
Yeah.
our phones and go to the shop floor.
Yeah.
So, my question with you will be like, you explained the challenges that happened during COVID. How was the leadership skill different virtually managing a team versus on the campus? And is it for the good or how was it for you?
It's definitely different, and it's still a learning experience, right? Because seeing people face to face and dealing with it is how all of us learned leadership and management, right? So in some sense, in while I was working in India, that was all the more critical and important because you are based in various locations and you move around. When I've been, even prior to that, based on US locations, I generally tend to be, until now, and as the family is getting older, I used to move around quite a bit, right? Even when I was based in US or in India, wherever my primary client locations was, I used to physically move there so that I can be more closer to that. Or I can't do that from a personal standpoint anymore. So there is definitely in terms of saying a no or negotiating all of that, it's definitely much more, I personally feel it easier, relatively speaking. It's not an easy situation, but makes it easier when you're in person, right? Because you actually see the body language of the person, the reactions and things like that. But when you are remote, it's definitely tough, right? It's tougher for sure. Something might have been a 5-minute conversation, yes or no, but when you are remote, on the phone or on video, you don't know what situations, both from a personal and professional standpoint, that they're going through. So it just becomes all the more important to take that extra time to understand that situation, being emotionally aware of what might be playing out, and probing a little bit more, conversing a little bit more before trying to close on what you want to close on, right? So it's definitely been an experience, and it's still a learning experience, right? And I pretty much now work mostly in a remote and travel kind of environment, right? So and I see that play out. And when you are in person, bridging the emotional part to the thinking part of what is at the task becomes easier because you're face to face. You can make out if the person is distracted by something else than what you are in, be it some other personal or professional. It becomes easier. Now it is not. So just taking that extra time and being a little bit more patient and aware of that is what that you can do, right? And then just work through the process.
Yeah, I agree with your going an extra mile when you have to interact virtually with the person than being in personal. Divya
Mhm.
Jyoti, I'll pass it on to Divya Jyoti and he'll ask you some further questions.
Sure. Yeah, Divya,
Good
welcome.
evening, Mr. Praveen. So
Good evening.
actually, could relate to the consulting because even I'm coming from the consulting industry. So I could relate that fact that we need to draw some boundaries with the client, yet being a professional, and yet we have to be always standing with the team first. So since now you are in a leadership position and you have a team, you are managing multiple individuals under your supervision. So how, as a transformational leadership skill, what are the leadership skills that are into play so that the individuals that are under you are also growing as a leader, and yet they are providing the thorough output that you have for them. So what are the how you're creating that environment for them and how effective they're reciprocating to you? Something.
No, absolutely. And I think the situations, over the years, if I were to look the last 12 to 14 or 15 years when I've had the opportunity to lead teams, fairly large teams, each of them are different, right? In terms of what kind of transformational experiences that you bring in, right? I would say, in terms of my experience, the eye-opening experience, in terms of where I have had the opportunity to, one, drive transformational change, it's a top down change, while at the same time being influencing the people around me, was back in 2015 timeframe, right? So it was a very unique situation. I would probably never get that kind of an opportunity again in my lifetime. So this was when I was still with Cognizant. So Cognizant won a large outsourcing agreement with the client at that time. It was a fairly large, kind of a deal, right? About 900 to 1,000 people in size. So I got the opportunity to lead that, right? And along with that, there were a couple of interesting dynamics playing out. The client that we were going to service at that time, they had about 250 of their client employees across US that Cognizant was rebadging into Cognizant. So they were going to be part of my team, right? So,
Okay. A
day
mixing of
minus
people.
one, they were like the client employee, and day one, day zero, they're yours, right?
Yes.
And they come with whole lot of dynamics, right? I mean, I had people who had worked in that client organization for 50 years, right? Just working, right? And all kind of different variety of experience. And on top of that, they had a captive in India, right? While I was not based in India at that time, they had a captive in India of 400 people. So
Mhm.
we took over the captive, right? So on bringing 250 of their employees with a variety of different experience, backgrounds, and all of that, and taking off their captive. And I had a counterpart who was working with me in India, who was overseeing all of that. Along with that, we had to drive multiple other change, right? So we were building out a facility for housing these associates. When I say housing, like from a professional standpoint, right? In Indianapolis, Indiana. So this goes back to that earlier example that I was talking about, right? In Indiana. So I had to create a 150 people office in Indiana, build it out so that these guys can be housed there, a part of the team, right? Who can be there and all of that. So there was a people related transformation that was happening, right? Be it the people who were coming from the Cognizant side, learning how they can work with all these repatch people, and these repatch people who have spent 50 years or 20 years or 10 years in a completely different environment, coming into what is an alien environment for them and learning consulting and being part of this and all of that. Time in terms of it was key for us to understand our core leadership team who's good at what, right? So there
Yes.
were some people who were, there was one guy who was good at achieving the technology transformation. How do you drive the maturity of the client landscape from a technology standpoint, right? So I put that person in charge of that track. You lead this track, right? You are the best at it. You know how to do it. His strength was not aligned at other things, right? And then there was a person who was good at he used to be in the military prior to that, right? So he's very organized, regimented, how to deal with chaos and cut through the clutter and all of that. So he was dealing with the entire part of helping integrate the people and coming into the organization. How do you navigate that and all of that, right? And there was a lady who was very good. She was a native of Indiana, so she knew how to navigate that. So setting up of that entire infrastructure there, scaling it up, she took the lead on that, right? So how do you bring the people who are who their strengths align with what you want to accomplish, and putting them in charge of different tracks was something key, right? And which is, obviously all our goals is the same, that we are focused on accomplishing the goals. But I lean in and help the person out in this situation by being more of an active mentor, right? In terms of, hey, this person is new to insurance but has the fundamentals from a sales and all of that in place. So how do I do it, right? And I need to do it giving the person confidence, but at the same time not stepping too much in the way, right? So there are times when I go the extra step preparing that person to be ready to face a client, right?
Uh, that's actually great, Pravina. What are the key takeaways I take that is that you give the space for the team to fail, fail and learn, and eventually after giving them the morale boost and the confidence that is required to perform well, post which I think the expected results is you receive from your subordinates. I think that's a very
Mhm.
key way to handle these subordinates and get the best outcome. So I would hand over to Ayush for the further questions.
Yeah.
Hello, Praveen.
Mm.
So, while leading a team, it often happens like people are from different backgrounds and they tend to approach different things differently, and you have to deal with them in a different manner. So, while leading a team, how do you think emotional intelligence plays a big role in managing a team and grooming your team members into future leaders?
Yep. No, it's a huge role, right? And I think to Pragya's earlier question, it becomes all the more tougher in the current environment that we are in, right? It was uh, again, it was one dynamics, less of a dynamics that was in play until about 3 years ago, and now it has become all the more tough, right? So that emotional intelligence is very key, right? And there's all this talk about work-life balance and personal versus professional and all that. That's all gone out of the window, right? People are like, you know, juggling so many things at any given point in time to accomplish what they need to accomplish, right? Irrespective of which part of the world you are from, which uh, gender you belong to, everyone is balancing many different things, right? So being implicitly aware of that, and I never, as much as I can, I never let uh, I don't react emotionally, right? When I say react emotionally, you need to be passionate about the work, but you can't let angers get into passion, right? That's not, it's mutually exclusive, right? So being calm about that becomes very important. And I've come across many different experiences in the past. Easy thing in the past used to be you could be, the same example where we rebadged 250 employees. There was a situation wherein we had 5, 6 very senior management folks who got hired into Cognizant at the time at director level, right? And each of them, with their experience, they were leading large teams there, the client organization. They had their own dynamics, right? Some of them were getting ready to retire. Some of them wanted a package and they wanted to retire. Some of them didn't want a package, and they didn't want to retire and things like that, right? So in those kind of situations, emotional intelligence played a huge role, right? The good thing was that at that point in time, I could sit face to face with them, understand one on one what was going on, and these were people that were really, I've they were 40, 50 years experience, right? They were a lot more experience than me and things like that, but they were not coming at it from a perspective of my experience. Hey, you are younger than me, or I have accomplished more than you. They were purely coming at it from their personal standpoint, right? if
Mm-hmm.
i if we are coming into your organization, what is your plan for me? Are you going to continue to keep me in the job, or are you ready to give me a package now so that I can retire? Or are you going to make me learn things, do things because I don't want to learn? I'm not, I have my personal responsibilities and all of that, right? So all of those reactions were completely emotional, from coming from an emotional place, and a lot of it was coming from a personal place, right? So it just takes additional amount of effort and time from your perspective, especially when you're not from their background and experience, and how you have seen the world the way they have seen the world, right? So being aware of that was amazing. And I had like I had this, I still remember this conversation, sitting in a Chicago office room with 4 of them, and having one conversation, and then realizing that, hey, the pattern is not similar. There are 3 different patterns there. One person who wants to retire in a year but wants the best of both worlds, right? So, and then one who wants to take a package and leave right now, one who doesn't want to, who doesn't have anything personal, doesn't have a family and stuff. The work is the motivation for that person. So he was worried about us laying him off because we are doing this transition, right? So you had to, in each of those situations, you had to handle it differently. Hey, you can be here as long as you want, and you can work as long as you are working and performing. There's nothing
Mm.
stopping you from working, right? So that was a very different conversation from, hey, I want a package now. Are you ready to give me a package? I'll take it and leave it. I'm ready to retire, right? So each of them were emotionally very different. So emotional intelligence is huge. That's what we are in the people business, knowledge business. That's what a lot of times it comes down to, right? And definitely in the world that we are in, takes all the more extra effort these days.
Thank you, Praveen. So I will now apologize to Rohit for further questions.
You know,
Hi, Praveen. You have just talked about emotional intelligence and emotional quotient in making decisions. So, as a leader, you have to make numerous decisions on a constant basis, and most of them are critical also. So, how do you manage your stress levels and cope with the demands of these decision makings?
yes, see, I think one is, um, as I said, I'm extremely passionate about what I do from a work perspective, but I am not emotionally attached to it. Right? When I say emotionally attached to it, you don't, and it's a comfort level that I've had to learn over a period of time. You as an individual, you don't uh, succeed or fail by what is in front of you immediately, right? You might miss a target, but as long as you're doing the right things to achieve the target, you're doing the right things, right? So what is the purpose of what you're doing is what I'm focused on, right? The purpose, and if you're doing the right things, the right steps, you might achieve the target, you might in some instances fail, but that doesn't define you as an individual, right? And that's not a failure. It's a failure of the situation, but not you as a failure, right? You learn from it and move on. So the critical thing for me is being passionate about what you do, but not emotional about what you do, right? And trusting that everyone around us, and then again, it takes time to build that trust. When you're in a new team, I think Dharan's earlier question, when you're in the new team, you're still learning people and things like that, and no two individuals are the same, right? And each of us have different personalities. And very recently I was at a company conference, and there was a speaker who brought in, and there are all these personality type tests, mbtis and things like that, right? And this guy had a new thing called as a zookeeper, right? So he said all individuals can be under four categories. Somebody is a monkey, somebody is a dolphin, somebody is a lion, and somebody is an elephant. This is the characteristics of an elephant, this is the characteristic of a lion, and things like that, right? So when you work with the team, that you realize that, okay, over a period of time, this guy is an elephant, this lady is a dolphin, or this person is a lion, and things like that. Then what motivates someone, right? And I'm a hardcore line, right? I'm like, put a task, when you open up my notebook, I love, like, these are the 10 things that I want to do today. I mean, not 10 all 10 things will get accomplished, but I'm like that, right? And in my team now, I realized after I uh, did that thing, the two individuals that I work with most closely, one is a monkey and one is a dolphin, right? Very little in common with with the lion, but you need to work with people like that, right? But eventually, I think the trust is important, that all of us are passionate. Some of us might be more emotionally showing that versus not. But irrespective of how passionate you are, not getting too emotionally caught up in that is the key, right? And stress is absolutely there, but it's not easy, right? You've said and done. The stress is going to be there, but you don't let the stress take over you, right? And how do you manage that through is, there is no easy way to it. I think some people are naturally better at it, some people are not. I think Dhoni said in cricket, right? He doesn't worry about what the results are as long as the process is right. I tend to um, look at it the same way. Obviously Dhoni and I are of similar age, right? He's a little younger than me, so I wouldn't say that my leadership style was based on his. But when you talk about a lot of things that he does now, I I tend to correlate with a lot of those kind of things, right? When understand the process, let the process define, don't get emotionally caught up in things. When you are part of the problem, and you're part of the solution, and things like that, right? So, and when you are uh, when you have the opportunity in the spotlight, if you are able to allow somebody else to lift the cup and Tony steps away and be on the side, that so be it, right? So I would say, as much as you can, in my instance, again, some of you might be Gujarat Titans fans today, but be a Dhoni as much as you can, I would say, right?
So we've had a lot of questions answered. I guess I think with your dental procedure, I think you've done really well, Praveen. I don't see
No,
any
no.
trouble anywhere.
Yeah, I could, no, absolutely. No,
Yeah,
no. It's
and it
great
was really
interacting with you guys.
the same likewise here.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, thank you for providing the opportunity to share my experience. Learned from the questions that you guys asked. Wish all of you all the very best.
Really an honor having you here, Praveen. And we're looking
No,
forward to associate with you, in the upcoming
no,
any events and anything. But
no, absolutely. Happy to help with my experience and anything that I can do.
yeah,
Lovely meeting you guys. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for reaching out.
thank you, Praveen. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thank
That's
you so
okay.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.